Hello, this is Matt from Lost Tempo, and today we are very fortunate to have the amazing Mike Biggs in conversation. So, Mike, who the hell are you?
Hi. The amazing Mike Biggs here, calling in. I'm I guess I'm a product guy, but I'm really a consultant at heart. So I fell into design and these things, but I'm just a fellow traveler in the universe, I think. That's probably the best way to describe me.
You're just a poor soul whose intentions are good.
Yeah, it
Please
might,
don't let me be misunderstood.
they might not even be good, to be honest.
So okay, so product, all right.
Mm.
So some people listen to this will know all about product, and some people won't have the foggiest. So when it says you work in the domain of product, what does that mean?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I appreciate it. And half of my work is clarifying. Just to backtrack slightly, we are running out of words in tech. Like we seriously have got hyphenated words on things. I'm working on a thing called um, a product platform, product owner, something, something. And it's just a mangling of things. And if you know what platforms are and products are and you're a tech person, you understand what I'm talking about. But I'll get back to what it is. Okay. So product, we're talking about it in technology. We're mostly building software usually. There might be a bit of hardware tech or something hanging off it, but we're kind of talking about software. And so what that then means is we're not really building products in the sense of a table or a chair or a house or anything like that. They're little packages of service. So really, we're talking about digital products and services. That's what product means. It gets even saucier than that. That's the thing that we make. But often the word product is also used in as a way to describe our approach. And it's sort of a methodological approach to the world. And we'll probably get into that a little bit more as we go on. But the backstory is we're probably talking about a software as a service type product because we are in that industry generally. Um, and one little clarification, I personally focus more on products that aren't the product that the customer sells. So startups make an appy thing and customers buy that thing or sell their privacy to participate or whatever they use as currency. And that's a one product
Trade their
thing.
souls, the usual,
Yeah,
yes.
their souls, the usual. And so that's, Facebook. How old am I? Okay, so I shouldn't say, TikTok. So I don't even know what a new app is, but, Facebook, Instagram, those ones. And by the way, they don't need to make any money pretty much ever because they can do some rocket to the moon IPO thing. Cool. Um, and one pizza, a software teams to work on it. Yeah, great. What I like to focus on is complex organizations that sell some other shit, like advertising media or, um, you know, I don't want to use a bank as an example because they're horrendous to deal with because of many reasons, complexity, compliance, blah blah blah. But they sell something else, and so all of the things we build often customer facing, customer touching, like an app for the bank or another tool for salespeople to optimize a solution in the advertising space. So we build all that stuff. What's interesting about that is there isn't just one product in the mix. There's probably 50 and how they talk to each other is a really, really interesting topic, and how each product manager or product owner is working into the complexity of the soulless enterprise. I threw that one in there just for you, Matt. Um, how they work into that. That's what product is for me. And so it becomes more than just building a thing. It's about how do we engage all of the bits and pieces and define and connect value. Yeah.
So I suppose what I'm hearing is like businesses that have products at their core, like say a SaaS software business, they may not necessarily need your help, but what you're doing is you're bringing a product mindset to businesses where it traditionally may not have lived or been nurtured. Is that a fair way of putting it?
It is. So I can help startups, and I'm happy to do that where they've got one or two products. If they're too startup-y, they don't have a lot of money, so pass. If they're about to scale or they're in that phase and they're well funded, maybe. Um, the second piece there is, you know, a product mindset you mentioned, and that's how we've been describing it for many years. I think the emergence of this idea of a product model is probably a little bit more helpful for the large enterprise that I'm working with. If I'm swanning around saying, "Hey, executives, you need a product mindset. Yeah, come on, let's get spiritual and get the yoga mats." Um, it's that doesn't inspire and give them belief that it's going to deliver. But model is a great word because it talks to the truth of a different way of thinking about this at an operational level. It touches into real business models and it talks about real delivery models and it connects all of those things. So that's
So they want something
probably,
they can see, they can touch, and they can probably screw up in some fashion.
well, the screw up part is interesting. So generally the ideal place for someone like me to help is where they've had a bit of a play around. They're good at agile delivery and engineering, probably. Let's assume they're good at engineering and good at agile delivery. Um, and they've been playing around with this idea of product, which is moving left or moving upstream into the business or thinking more about value or however you want to describe it. And they've had a bit of a dabble around and there's pockets of capability, but as a holistic process or as a holistic backbone model, the product model, it's kind of not quite right yet. And the industries that I've found to be most open to it are ones that are less constrained by compliance and these sorts of regulatory things. But what happens in those places is they've given it a really good go, and there's lots of opinion in those businesses. Lots of stuff is driven by ego, which comes with there's two
Hippo.
sides to that. Well, egos can be good because that's where a lot of embodied expertise is. And you'll say, okay, that person really knows their stuff and we'll take their advice. Cool. There's also the bad ego, which is, hippos deciding things based on who knows what. But in those places that have got a little bit of stuff happening, coming through and saying, great, you've got an appetite, you've got some vibes for this, you've had some successes. Let's actually get a serious end-to-end model that connects delivery and engineering and design and also the product strategy, which connects to business models and further up into the business value streams and things like that. So how do we create a thing that methodically and almost boringly repeatedly connects all of that for delivery of value to customers? Yeah.
So what's typically in a product model then, Mike?
So in your product model, essentially, well, let me just talk about some examples of how it's worked in
Yeah.
the past. So there's a couple of main buckets, right? How do we connect to value? What are the business models? How are we listening to the market? The middle part is how do we actually connect and decide what to do, opportunity management, that kind of thing and then and setting some goals and things like that. And then the actual delivery part, which is where you're running experiments, you're doing design, you're doing delivery work. And often organizations will say, come in and help us with our staff here in.
Yeah,
And
okay.
for viewers at home, I'm motioning to the right of the non-existent screen where which you have no idea which part of the thing I'm talking about. So the delivery and the design, the tangible part is often where the focus is. Help these staff get better at product and doing experiments and stuff like that. And the thing about it is the real product model is actually it's sort of through the middle, taking the SDLC and saying the software
Sorry,
development lifecycle,
SDLC, software delivery life cycle.
software development lifecycle, I
Thank
think.
you.
Ah, nice one. And I've been doing stupid things like sticking a P on the front of it and saying, we've got a product oriented, software development. And it's kind of bastardization of the terminology to get conversations happening. But ultimately, the software development lifecycle, as however you've articulated in your organization to work for you, needs this product thing bit before, bit above, bit woven into it to make the product aspects come to life, right? And so that middle row is where I'm really interested. It says, what opportunities, how do we embed into our process a methodical way for capturing, evaluating, and then experimenting on opportunities that will reach our organizational goals? And to do that, um, it often requires creating a whole bunch of new cadences and new processes, some new, in the agile vernacular, some new ceremonies that are upstream. But some of that work isn't ceremony oriented, so you need to train individuals to do it constantly. So product managers need to think about new things as well. Um, So what I'm getting at is there's actual skills, but there's also about this backbone of the process, and that's the core of the model for me. Now, even if you've got that in place, it's still only an answer to a problem that we don't know what that problem is. You still need to also look into the organization because I'm working with these complex organizations. So you also need a methodical approach to understanding the value streams that you're serving within the organization. Are we building this product to serve sales? Are we serving delivery of another piece of thing? And also, are we listening to the market around strategic change, competitive stuff, so that we can make sure we're building the right things? And so, those opportunities that we're mining and sort of moving through this middle conveyor belt only have value if they're taking us in the right direction on something broader that actually makes sense in our coherent strategy, let's say.
So, without naming names,
Mm.
what would be an example of this, Mike?
When you say an example, an organization that's doing it or a particular product,
Yeah.
like what do you want to hear?
So just make it a little bit more concrete
Or
for me and
juicy.
tell me a little bit of yeah. Give me a juicy story, Mike.
I can squeeze the juice. So,
Excellent.
so exactly roughly that story, but I'll tell more about the middle and up into the organization layer. So I was at a client recently and blah, 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 and it kind of was low compliance, low constraints, let's call it a creative.
Fast and loose.
Yeah, fast and loose and lots of opinions and people trying things and great. And so their challenge now is let's just get some models in place and some structure and some agreed process. All of those words are kind of the same thing and aren't at the same time. Um, so they said, come in, do some training. Great. Did the training, got the training with individuals started, but the problem is I couldn't build capability in those individuals because we weren't clear about the overall broader goals and expectations of not only the product model, which bits do we need to be good at, but the goals and expectations of collective product strategy. So it became, okay, let's work on the middle layer here. All right, what's the end-to-end product process? And that was great. So one of the interesting pieces there is um, different roles had different sort of ownership over feeling like the SDLC and delivery is their thing to own versus product. So we did have someone leading product, but we also had someone very delivery oriented thinking about the same space. And so the challenge that became really clear to me was should we create an exemplar type piloty team that's able to do good quality work, demonstrate that through this middle layer, integrating the SDLC and a product approach and learning and refining something that works for this particular company and sharing that and engaging others through that method? Or does this company um, need the end-to-end process, let's call it, well defined first, and then lots of people to agree and sign off on that? Now, I think culturally, this organization was the former. Do something nice first, get some success, draw people in with your success and exciting times, and go forth. But it also had this other problem of the roles and sort of ownership, and so it was tricky in that I was having separate conversations with different people, the delivery folk and the product folk, even though we should all be in the same room at the same time. For some reason we weren't. Some reasons, sometimes we weren't. Um, but bringing them all along on the journey together and kind of giving both of them as much of a product oriented solution in their arsenal to then use in their work. So as a consultant, I don't need to swan around telling everyone the answers. The real trick is just constantly giving content to others so that they can go, yeah, that looks like it solves my problem, and I'm going to talk about that thing and whatever. So we went along the way, and I still don't, in retrospect, know which way would have been the right way, but we kind of chipped away on both. And there was also a little bit of, as in process, but also demonstrating. Um, One particular product sort of emerged just through an organicness of working with people as the main per team, let's call it, that was able to demonstrate what good looked like, and then they were able to show others along the way, even though we were constantly chipping away at the process. So I know what the answer was, but we weren't allowed to talk about, exemplar teams. So, hmm, politics.
But it sounded like it got to where you needed to go in the end.
Yes, and it got to the point where my problem now wasn't that we didn't have an agreed process for each product. What was missing was how do all the products, and they're kind of I'm doing inverted speech marks here, um, to say products because they're all internal tools and
Yeah,
a mishmash of different
yeah,
things. But how do all of those products uh, talk to each other and manage interrelated value? Because first we've cracked the problem of, well, how do I make sure I've just got opportunities and I'm hitting my goals in one product? Cool. Done. We're all working on a similar product oriented backbone. Sure. Now the problem is we've got lots of interconnected expectations and dependencies. So not only is that a cluster for the people at the end of the process down the bottom of the stack on sort of enterprise tools, they end up with everything. Not only that, but at the value planning part in product strategy that's happening for each product, they weren't thinking about how it relates to all the other products. So I created one thing that completely revolutionized the conversation, and it's so basic, but they didn't have a language and they didn't have a visualization to think about this problem. So in addition to product skills, I think in enterprise there's a real need and magic that can come from adding a little bit of service design if you're familiar with that practice. It's got a lot in it, but I think of it as being more focused on individuals and interactions. And one of their key artifacts is the service blueprint, which basically is one way of looking at the whole organization, and it has the customer and the customer value streams at the top. Then you've got a front of house staff under that. You've got an in-house processes and maybe some staff underneath that. And then at the bottom, you've got products and technology and stuff like that down the bottom. And a customer will flow across the top from left to right, and a bunch of stuff happens to make sure value happens and we make money. Cool. They hadn't visualized anything in that way before. And I did a bit of a bastardized version to say, here are all of these products that we're talking about in a portfolio, and they're all interrelated in some way. And I plotted them all over this thing. And so some of them were close to the customer, some of them are really down low. And what emerged was they all terminated into one product at the bottom. Chaos. And the other thing was the interconnectedness between all of them was quite high. There were a lot of connections, and so that just gave them the visualization and the education, such a simple thing, to then go and turn that into action or look for a place and look for a forum in which to have that collective conversation with those people. So then the appetite was to create that thing. So what I then created, and we spent a couple of months preparing for it, was the multi-product strategy for the whole portfolio. And so everyone comes with all of their stuff and we talk about things and blah, 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 blah. A little bit like quarterly planning or PI planning or big room planning. However, those things are very technically delivery focused as a general rule, I find, and the kind of the why are we doing it is kind of assumed. So those planning sessions are generally about t-shirt size, ticket size, sort of road mapping, delivery road mapping, who's going to help who on which widget do I need to build. That's interesting, but not first. The first thing to do is making sure all the products understand how we're helping each other from a customer value point of view. Who needs what from a features and customer outcomes perspective, and we facilitated that. And the facilitation wasn't just the many products into the one; it was almost the reverse on the business side. What we took was many business stakeholders internally who all had their own strategy, their interpretation of the CEO's strategy, so they're all internal customers. So we took that rainbow of things and prismed that into a single white light. And then that single white light prismed out into all the many products. So we've got Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon um, visual times two, because in the product portfolio, we've got a rainbow of things. But in our value conversation and our portfolio strategy conversation that I'm describing, we've put it all into one, and on the other side, it's a rainbow again back into the organization. Because remember, we're serving value streams in sales, marketing, delivery, transformation office, whatever the hell they do, it goes on. Mm.
So there's sort of like there's a bringing people together, and then there's a freeing them up to do their own individual things after you've brought them together. There's a
I
moment of unity.
I think I think you're telling the story in a human actions and time sense, and that's true. What I'm imagining though is that there's a constant, if this cadence that we created and this model where there were some artifacts and conversations that they needed to have, if that's happening regularly enough with a check-in quarterly, that rainbow at the top in the organization to a prism of white light to the rainbow again should be constantly flowing, right? So in the same way that
The spice must flow, Mike. The spice must
the
flow.
spice must flow, far out. How old are we? Um, but in the same way that dual track delivery is something that we all know and love. Deliver some stuff, but do continuous discovery as well. That's on one product. This is saying we've got product strategy happening in multiple products right next to each other. They must be aligned in the meaning of that based on many inputs from the rest of the organization. And that should flow constantly. It's almost like a dual track portfolio. I'm kind of mincing words together right now, and maybe I'll keep it and blog about it. Who knows? Yeah. Mm.
Oh, I like the rainbow prism splitting
Yeah.
kind of like unifying and splitting metaphor. The other thing it reminds me of is like water flows or engines,
Hmm.
where you're constantly like you're keeping it constantly going. It's not a one-off thing. It's
Right.
the other
And
thing that we're touching on.
I mean, that's probably one of the core things in product that we haven't talked about. When we're moving to a product model, the assumption that you and I probably embody and we haven't explicitly talked about here yet is that we're moving away from project orientation where there's a beginning and an end. So you talk about water flow. I describe it as always having a tap on for every single customer problem. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it goes from a drip, right, when you're just trying to get started and you can turn it up a bit and then it's flowing more. And then you might turn it back down again, but you never turn it off unless you completely kill that thing if it becomes a commodity or whatever you kill. But it's quite like that. And in the other thing, it's basically water flowing, but represented by light and rainbows instead, basically something like that. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
okay. And then so where's all this going? So it sounds like you've actually got sort of quite a developed model now, Mike. What's going to happen with this next? Where do you feel it's heading?
I think product management in its current form has sort of been born out of tech. And it's because product management, some time ago, the practice existed a long, long time ago. They kind of lost their way and stopped focusing on the customer. This is 20, 40 years of history. And then what happened is, user experience designers became a really powerful and important role to solve some of that. But now you've got the coming back together in that modern product management born out of tech is quite sophisticated in thinking about the customer. Um, but it is still born out of tech in a lot of situations, and it doesn't help, I guess, to get away from that, that we're building things out of technology, right? But I think the next thing is the bit organizations truly accepting that product management and product as a model must include the business model as well. And the capability is there. It exists within product management canon, but not every organization accepts it. So you'll have a lot of product managers in organizations that don't properly own their P&L. And so that creates a bit of drama. I mean, if you don't want to be responsible, maybe that's a boon. But being responsible and making good decisions, I think that's a good thing.
Well, I think either you control the P&L or the P&L controls you.
Well, sure, you're a funny guy, but like someone's someone's thinking about that P&L, and if it's not
Correct.
you, then they're going to control you. So if that's like, Barry in finance, your influence and control over the product for the better is probably going to be diminished because he's got a really different um, thing on his plate to think about. Um, but I think it's business models really becoming part of it, and um, business is getting over this weird hump that we're in at the moment, which is we're kind of doing this funny thing where we've got a technical product owner and a business product owner, and they're kind of pairing together. And are they equals, or is one more senior than the other? Who knows? It's kind of a bit weird. And I think the next step is to truly break down the barrier and accept that there's overlap and integration there, and the one role emerges essentially from that. I think it needs to live a little bit more on the business side, but not in the old sense that the business was a customer of technology. I
Yeah.
think that separation needs to be completely dissolved, but the product leader needs to be very much a business strategy person, and not this kind of weirdy twosies role at the moment that we have.
No, so a much more unified approach. One role, not necessarily to rule them all, but to enable them all, maybe.
Something like that. And if they've got P&L, then they can rule with a soft hand. If they don't have P&L, they have to go around badgering everyone and just
With your
being,
begging bowl.
yeah, yeah. And so, um, it's funny, we tell leaders to be humble and servant leadership and all of this. And the problem is that doesn't work if you don't actually have real power that you can hold back. That only works if you have genuinely have a big stick and you can hit people in the head with it. Sorry, I shouldn't use,
But you choose not to.
but
You
you choose
choose.
not to. Yes. Whereas someone who's legitimately impotent has no gets no pat on the back for being a servant leader type person because they couldn't do anything otherwise. They have to go around begging. So this is levers of power that I think about in this case. And so the P&L ownership is a nice product example of that. I don't have a short answer for that, but I think it comes down to products and services can't be separate from a cohesive strategy. So the the organizational strategy that the company puts together, there's executive ownership of certain things there, but I think that's where product ownership really starts and ends, and you need to make sure there's a really clear, practical working connection amongst individuals who understand each other to make that work, um, and not have sort of this grade layer of middle management in between, or product managers being sort of a bit distant. I think that's problematic.
And so I think we're coming to the end of our time.
Yeah.
So perhaps a final question would be, what's a product that you admire out there?
My favorite product of all time is actually my gumboots, but that's not what you want to know.
Oh no. If it genuinely is, I would
I'll
love to
I'll
hear
tell
about
you
the
a quick anecdote
gumboots.
about that one. It's basically, you know, 20 years ago, feels like maybe 15, whatever. I moved into um, a house, and I suddenly became yard guy because, that's what happens to all of us. And I bought these gumboots, $20 from Bunnings, and didn't think of it and much of it at the time. But two things. One, I can use them for non-wet activities, and they work really well for like grass. Surprise? Yes, I was. And then the second point is they just keep working. Like they turn up and do their job. They don't give me any shit. They don't need a Bluetooth connection or a battery to be recharged or any of this stuff. They just turn up and do it. And for the value proposition, $20 ages ago, and they're still going, I cannot speak more highly. Like I've got a fancy car and I hate it. I've got a fancy things in the house and I've got a Bluetooth speaker that makes a noise that's too loud. The gadunk when it connects and disconnects. That's really annoying. These fancy things are terrible. Yeah, gumboots.
But yeah, it sounds like they've got versatility and reliability.
Yeah, reliability. It's just like if I give it personified sort of, it's just the gumption to gumption. See what I did there?
I
It's
said
just,
the gumption boots.
yeah, gumption boots. They just turn up and do it. And I don't have to think about it at all. Yeah. And I think if we can make, I'll link it back for you. If we can make a digital product like that, um, then that's fantastic. And, just back to the service design thing, I think adding a little bit of service design to your products, which is really about humans using the thing, start there and end there, and you'll make your product like a gumboot that you just don't see, you don't think about. It doesn't give me any jip. It just is great, and I don't need to worry about why or how it works. That's the kind of thing that I want to build. And by the way, if I can say to a client, don't build this thing, don't make a new thing, that's my go-to. Do we have to build this dumb app? Can we do nothing? Can we kill an app? Can we just do it with process or talking to people? Yes, please. Because again, that's gumboots.
Mike Biggs, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.